WPT.
It's an airfield in northern Iraq. You're seeing the pictures right here. Now in the hands of the U.S. Army. Members of the Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade parachuted into the Kurdish-controlled area. Under the cover of darkness, the military will now begin flying troops and equipment to the field. Exclusive CNN pictures right there. Brent Sadler brought those back for us. On the southern side of the country, British forces say Iraqi fighters have taken up positions in civilian areas of Basra. Resistance stiffer than expected. The British are warning the battle for Basra could take weeks, maybe even months. Meanwhile, British aircraft bombed a column of about 70 Iraqi armored vehicles seen leaving Basra and heading south toward Qasr. Arab TV networks have shown video of a bombed marketplace in Baghdad. Iraqi officials say 15 people were killed in the strike. The Pentagon says it did not target the market. U.S. officials suggest a stray Iraqi anti-aircraft shell or missile could have hit the market. According to British officials, an investigation is underway. At the Pentagon, Joint Chiefs Vice Chairman General Peter Pace says Iraq has executed some prisoners of war. General Pace did not elaborate. Now, earlier, Pentagon sources told CNN they were looking into a report that Iraqi soldiers shot and killed 7 U.S. soldiers as they were surrendering with their hands up. And it's been 3 days since Newsday heard from a reporter and a photographer covering the war in Baghdad. You are seeing their pictures there. Newsday is investigating reports the two were expelled from Iraq and were escorted to the border of Syria or Jordan. A freelance photographer is also reported missing. 7 U.S. servicemen wounded from the war in Iraq arrived at a hospital on the southern coast of Spain today. They are among the first patients to be treated at the so-called Rapid Assembly Hospital, which opened last month under a bilateral agreement. Still more happening. President Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair will plot war strategy again today at Camp David. They're also expected to map out plans for humanitarian relief and a post-war Iraq. Mr. Blair favors a more prominent role for the UN than President Bush is said to. And back in Washington, lawmakers paused to remember one of their own. Veteran Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a legend, died yesterday following complications from an appendectomy. He had served in the Senate for 24 years, from 1977 to 2001. Daniel Patrick Moynihan dead at the age of 76. He will be buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on Monday. And here's what's coming up in our coverage in the next hour. We'll give you the latest on the U.S. paratroopers who are now on the ground in northern Iraq. Plus, we're going to update you on the explosions at a Baghdad marketplace yesterday, find out what both Iraq and the U.S. are now saying about the blast. And we're going to take you across the border into Kuwait to see how Kuwaitis are reacting to war with our own Darren Kagan. CNN's war coverage continues right now.
And good morning to you, 4:41 Eastern Time, 12:41 Baghdad time. You're seeing a live picture from Baghdad, and you see the weather has cleared, which means that coalition forces will probably be at work again today. I'm Carol Costello.
And I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks for watching our continuing coverage. We've been going at it all morning long. We've got a couple hours left to go, and there's a lot to cover what is going on right now in the war on Iraq.
Yeah, we want to give you a visual sense of where coalition forces are in Iraq right now. Most coalition forces on the ground are now in central and southern Iraq, but the U.S. military is also building up its northern front. 1,000 paratroopers are now on the ground in the north, securing a key airfield in the Kurdish-controlled zone. And top U.S. military officials say early reports that a large group of Republican Guard troops were heading south from Baghdad, and they appear to be based on inaccurate intelligence.
We've been hearing a lot from our Darren Kagan, who is in Kuwait City. There was apparently a Scud, excuse me, I should say some sort of missile attack on Kuwait, shot down at least by Patriot missiles. Darren Kagan has the latest on that, as well as the mood in Kuwait, where the abnormal, I suppose, has become normal. Darren?
Yeah, just something I'll make clear. It probably was not a Scud. Of all the missiles that have been launched at Kuwait over the last week and a half or so, none, according to the U.S. military, have been Scud missiles, and none have contained any biological or chemical weapons. Want to move on, actually, since we kind of covered the missile situation. As I said, a couple of Patriots fired up and they intercepted that missile. Let's move on then to a remarkable military maneuver, and you had just mentioned this in the last couple of moments, taking place in northern Iraq. It happened overnight. We're going to roll some video for you so you can get a sense of what it looked like in northern Iraq overnight. This is 1,000 Army paratroopers parachuting their way into the Kurdish-controlled area of Iraq. The soldiers are from the U.S. Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade. They parachuted to the ground, and then they walked across flat open fields. They're there to assemble in the new morning light. They began to secure the Harir airfield. It is not far from Bashar. That's also where we find our Brent Sadler. He had the opportunity, I believe, to see these paratroopers as they fell from the night sky and tell us more about what their mission is now that they're on the ground and how they're going to make that happen. Brent, hello.
Hello, Darren. Yes, indeed. We've been out for most of the night trying to work out where these 1,000 paratroopers had dropped. And indeed, we came across them shortly after daybreak at Harir Airfield. Quite an incredible scene to see the paratroopers come across the drop zone several square miles in width and really beginning to assemble and to secure their perimeter. So I just simply came from my observation post, walked across the fields to them and introduced myself. Good morning, Platoon Sergeant Brent Sadler from CNN. Good morning.
Sergeant Geringer.
Welcome to Iraq.
Thank you.
How was it? Tell me, please. The parachute drop overnight?
Parachute drop was well. Everything went according to plan. Planes came in, dropped us off, just like how we normally do business.
Yes, indeed, like they normally do business. We know from the comments they gave me there that the paratroopers had dropped from a height of about 1,200 feet. Now that means they're floating down in that pitch black for less than a minute. About 45-50 seconds, they were telling me, with their heavy weights strapped beneath them and then hitting the ground with a thud after hearing their canopies snap open immediately after exiting those aircraft. Now, 1,000 of them were dropped into the Kurdish territory in 10 sticks, as it's called in military jargon. That's 100 per stick, 10 aircraft, 1,000 paratroopers very quickly deployed in this area. Speed is the essence, and getting all the paratroopers out of the aircraft onto the ground in one piece is the aim of the mission. That was accomplished. We've had 2 days of heavy rain here, so they had a soft landing. A couple of troopers told me they were surprised there wasn't sand, surprised to see snow on the mountains either side of the Harir airfield, and thankful that they were down in one piece with just a few bumps and scrapes in some cases. And really their main problem was getting rid of the mud which had caked on their faces, on their legs and on their weapons. There's not really been much interaction yet with the Airborne Brigade and the local Kurdish fighters here, but expect to have liaison and coordination building in the days ahead. Now, shortly after we found those paratroopers and took those exclusive pictures, we then heard from my colleague CNN's Ben Wiedemann that in these mountains behind me over there, those rolling hills over there rather, where the Iraqi front lines are, there had been yet another day of airstrikes, 4 huge explosions, puffs of smoke on that ridge line, another day of softening up targets on those Iraqi frontline positions. So we now have the first deployment of significant numbers of visible ground forces here in Kurdish territory. Expect those numbers to build to several thousand in the days ahead. Also expect, I'm told from Kurdish sources, to see heavy transport aircraft come into that airfield, which has now been secured by the Airborne Brigade, the 173rd, and expect to see heavier equipment, armoured personnel carriers and more weaponry coming in. So really a lot more activity now on this northern front. Back to you, Darren.
Couple quick questions for you here, Brent. First of all, they're there, the paratroopers are there to secure that Harir airfield, but what is the shape of that airfield, and is it any shape to receive the kind of planes that need to bring in the heavy equipment now?
Yes, surprisingly, it is absolutely in very good shape. The airstrip was built in the early 1980s by Saddam Hussein, but it's actually never been used. I've been on the runway myself expecting this deployment at any day, and so I've driven along the runway. It's in good shape. It's almost a couple of miles long. It's big enough to take heavy military transporters. It's got a parking apron where now the paratroopers and special forces, 2 helicopters were also on the ground there as I saw the paratroopers come in. And there is enough space to move men and equipment there fairly rapidly. A flow of men and equipment can be expected to come through there, and it's no surprise that this is happening. The Kurds were telling me several days ago to expect this Plan B to come into operation, that the Plan A, a deployment of plus 60,000 troops coming to here from Turkey, had been put aside because of complications with Ankara. Now Plan B going into effect at the same time as we're seeing daily now attacks by coalition warplanes against Saddam Hussein's northern defensive line. 3 army corps up there, 120,000 Iraqi army troops hold that line, a 500-mile line. This is just the beginning of Plan B now taking shape. Darren.
Incredible pictures from northern Iraq, bringing new meaning, I guess, Brent, to thanks for dropping in. Much wanted, much awaited, much anticipated, these paratroopers and this coalition presence in northern Iraq on behalf of the Kurdish people. Brent Sadler in northern Iraq, thank you so much. As I toss it back to Anderson and Carol, I'm going to mention we're getting word about that CENTCOM briefing that now has been delayed. We're getting word that will take place at 7 a.m. Eastern. Of course, whenever it does begin, you'll see it live right here on CNN. For now, I'm going to toss it back to Atlanta.
All right, thanks a lot, Darren. There was a really interesting CENTCOM briefing that we covered a couple hours ago from British Air Marshal who basically blasted Al Jazeera, the Arab language network, for airing video purported to show 2 British soldiers lying dead. It was quite a briefing. It
certainly was.
A lot of stuff came out.
We're going to be talking a lot more about that. Right now, we want to toss it back to Martin Savage, embedded with the Marines. Martin, what do things look like from your perspective?
Well, Carol, we wanted to show you this, really it's sort of a roadside rest on the way north for the U.S. military and specifically the Marines. Tactically, it is known as a tactical assembly area. Take a look out here. This is the perimeter. Marines are experts at digging. Digging in is something that they do first and foremost when they reach a position. The assembly area here is really a parking lot, a temporary one that is set up for military vehicles, set up for the men. It is a place where they can refuel, refit, repair, and get some much needed rest and also have food as well. So in some respects, it is a down area, a rest area, but also obviously being in Iraq in the middle of a war, it's got to be a very secure area. That's why you've got the perimeter being dug in over there. This shows you more of what the setup looks like. There's literally dozens and dozens and dozens, probably more than that, of military vehicles, everything from armored personnel carriers. There's also aviation assets that are here, helicopters flying out of here, a medical unit. This is all that is something that can be set up very quickly and can be taken apart very quickly. And this is not necessarily permanent. It is just a base of operations for the short term, and then you pick up and you move everything on. Speaking of foxholes, this is our foxhole. We had to dig that last night. We are not such exceptional diggers that it is that deep. Normally ours are much more shallow than that, but we had the help of a backhoe, thanks to the Marines. So it's another indication that supplies are moving in. And you can see by the young Marines over here, it is a well-needed rest for many of them. They have been going hard at it almost 24 hours a day. So this is a chance for a few hours to try to catch up. But they know they're going to be moving on again. They may not know what the objective is going to be, but they know they will be moving soon. And one other thing about the landscape we're in, you may see it in the background here. I think it's very arid, almost looks like the Bonneville Salt Flats. That is not the case the way it was until, let's say, just the very end of the last Gulf War. This was marshland, this was wetland, this was very much very green and full of water. Evidence of that I hold in my hand is that you can see these are shells here, freshwater snail shells. So what am I getting at? Well, the whole story from military commanders to us is that after the war in retribution here, Saddam Hussein basically had all the water channeled out, drained the wetlands in a strike back against what are called the marsh Arabs, who had been sympathetic against the Saddam Hussein regime. And as a result of that, what used to be very lush, very wet, is now just plain desert once more, and military authorities say it is just one more in a long list of atrocities that Saddam Hussein has carried out. We have no way exactly to verify that, but we do hold the shells in our hand. Carol?
Martin, I wanted to ask you more about that foxhole that you dug, because you actually slept in that overnight, didn't you?
Well, it depends. Some nights we sleep in them, some nights we sleep right next to them. They're not the most comfortable thing. There's 4 of us that have to fit inside there, and if we slept in that one, we'd be curled up pretty tight. There have been other nights, though, where, yes, we do sleep inside of them. You lay your sleeping bag down. The very first night, when we got out to the departure area, that is the staging area where the troops were being massed in northern Kuwait, we arrived after sunset and saw the Marines digging in. We got out our shovel. I drove it into the soil, and it bounced right back at me. I mean, that soil was as hard as a New York City sidewalk. And for the next 2 hours, we scraped, dug, and cursed our way about 8 inches into the soil, which was barely enough to lay down, but at least if there was a Scud missile or some sort of artillery barrage, we'd have some form of shelter. Some of the Marines that night dug for 8 hours straight, got an hour of sleep, and then picked up and moved on, only to dig again.
I know, and then all they have to eat are those MREs. I just don't know how you guys keep going out there.
Well, the meals are actually pretty good. MREs are, of course, the military food. This is prepackaged food. And the menus are improved. In fact, they've improved them from the last time I had them, which was in Afghanistan. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, this is what we're talking about here as we hold up item number A. And this one is chicken with noodles. It's not a favorite of mine, not a favorite of the group. But they've also improved them with such things as vanilla cappuccino that you get, or strawberry and chocolate milkshakes and vanilla milkshakes. So they have, oh, and I'm sorry, my cameraman Scotty's reminding me of the #1 big hit that is new on the menu, a hamburger, which is essentially 2 slices of sort of wheat bread and a hamburger patty that goes in the middle, and you get barbecue sauce and then smother it with cheese spread.
Oh.
And by golly, when you've been out here for a while, it's pretty good. Pretty good indeed.
Well, I suppose if you're hungry, anything tastes good.
Very hard to find.
Yeah. You know, Marty, things seem so calm there.
It does. It does.
Calm there now, but it wasn't so calm overnight, was it?
No, well, last night was relatively quiet. The night before, as we explained, and others have reported about this, the attacks that have been taking place along the supply line goes all the way back to northern Kuwait. That's some distance now. And it's the main artery that brings in all the ammunition, brings in the food, brings in the fuel, and brings in the follow-up troops. That makes the fighting force. And of course, because it is spread along such a long distance, it's vulnerable at times. And the Fedayeen, which are these militias that have been striking against that supply line, have been more a harassment, not a major problem according to the military. But they have been striking at the convoy. So now the focus has been on trying to secure those lines. The military knows they're vital. And we went out on one such operation to protect a shipment of 250,000 gallons of fuel. And we were warned as we went down the route that we could expect some fire, and that's exactly what we got. A lot of small arms fire, sometimes very heavy, focused on the armored personnel carriers, rocket-propelled grenades. One of them just narrowly missed the vehicle that the CNN crew rides in. And there was a lot of shooting that was going on and a lot of confusion because it was pitch dark that night. Night vision goggles don't work when there is no illumination. So there were armored personnel carriers running into each other. We got struck at least 3 times. Once we ran into a house, another time we ran into a Humvee, and then another time an armored vehicle backed into us, and you are literally thrown around there like a tennis shoe in the dryer. You just get bounced around, which is how I ended up with a mark on my nose. But it was a wild night. However, as a result of the heavy firepower that U.S. forces poured on, they say they saw nothing last night. And that's part of their strategy. Hit hard when you were attacked and send the message. Don't do it again.
Well, we're glad you're
Apparently for the last 24, that has worked.
Yeah, we're glad you're safe and sound. Martin Savage, thanks for joining us. We've got to run now because we've got Becky Diamond on the line.
Martin Savage, just awesome.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have Becky Diamond now. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we will.
All right.
Sings a classic country song. It's unforgettable.
I fall.
Presenting Anne Murray, Country Croonin'.
I can't stop loving.
30 timeless country classics.
Put your sweet lips a little closer.
These are Anne's favorite classic country songs.
Are you lonesome tonight?
Get Anne Murray Country Croonin' on 2 CDs or cassettes.
Make the world
You'll treasure this collection forever.
I bless the day I found you.
Please call now.
Call 1-800-306-5300 to order Anne Murray on 2 CDs or 2 cassettes for just $24.99 plus shipping. Or send check or money order to the address on your screen. Call now.
CNN Today, overnight developments of battles with live reports from the front lines. Plus, one U.S. Marine's mother's surprising personal battle against the war on the next American Morning with Paul Zahn. CNN Today, 7 a.m. Eastern.
Earlier this morning from CENTCOM, we learned that the delivery of humanitarian aid to the port in Qasr may be delayed as much as 24 hours, may not happen until Friday. This because 2 mines were discovered and detonated in the waters near Qasr. For the latest, we go to Becky Diamond, who is with the Australians patrolling those waters. Becky, what does things look like this morning?
Well, possible mines have been detected in the waterway leading to Qasr. And pardon the chopper in the background, I apologize for the noise. The mines have been detected, and they're sending out mine sweepers now to take a look at what those objects might be. And that's in the waterway itself, not in the port of Qasr. That's in the KA waterway leading from the Persian Gulf up to the port town of Qasr. Now, the Sir Galahad was expected to have arrived yesterday. It was supposed to pass through this waterway, and then we were told it was supposed to arrive today. Now it's being pushed back again because of this threat. Anderson?